On this edition of Fulton Law and Justice, Fulton's solicitor connects with a prosecutor from Long Beach, California. We'll tell you why. And later in the Our Children, Our Future segment, Juvenile Court explains how accountability courts are helping young offenders and their families get their lives back on track. I'm Jolene Butts Freeman. Fulton Law and Justice begins right now. Welcome to Fulton Law and Justice, your inside look at the work of Fulton's justice partners. Now today we begin with our restorative justice segment. And in the segment, a special guest from the West Coast and a success story from someone who was given a second chance. Here's Fulton solicitor Keith Gamage.
Welcome to the Solicitor General's Restorative Justice Program. My name is Keith Gamage. I'm your Solicitor General. The Solicitor General's office prosecutes traffic and misdemeanor offenses like DUI, domestic violence, and other cases involving injury to people and also injury to property. Part of our mission is to provide smart, fair, and restorative justice to Fulton's citizens while protecting our public safety. Restorative justice comes in many forms, one of them involving the clearing of criminal records to allow citizens to enjoy the full rights and benefits of citizenship. Today we are discussing record restriction in Georgia, otherwise known as criminal expungements. We're joined by a special guest, Mr. Derek George, a former youthful offender turned community leader and activist, here to tell us how he took advantage of the legal opportunity to clear his record and maximize his opportunity for success. Mr. George, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mr. Gamage.
Tell us how you first came into contact with the criminal justice system and what led to your arrest.
Wow. Well, many years ago, I was raised up on the south side of Atlanta, in fact, Carver Homes housing project. At that time, there was a lot of gang activity, drug activity, and I was a product of my environment. So one day I was on the block, me and my homies, as you may put it, and Red Dogs rolled up on us. Back then they had a Red Dog unit, and they rolled up on us and they charged me with some offenses.
Have you been arrested more than once?
Yes, I have.
And have you been charged with felonies?
Yes, I have.
And did these things occur in your youth?
Yes.
Roughly how old were you when you had your first and last contact with the criminal justice system?
I would say around 19 to 21.
And were you ever under a sentence in the Superior Court of Fulton County?
Yes.
And did you avail yourself of the First Offender Act?
Oh, yes, I did.
Can you tell us about that experience?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I was charged with a crime that I did not commit. I pled guilty on that crime because I thought at the time it was in my best benefit because I had other charges before I was charged with that charge.
So the charge that you're talking about entering the plea to in Superior Court, was it a drug-related charge?
Yes, it was.
And were there other people that were around at the time of the incident?
Yes, sir.
And is there a lesson that young people can learn from that experience about being with the right people and being in the right places?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. The young man that I was charged with, it was actually me, and one had a gun in the car, and the other one had a substance, in his breeches. And when the police came up, the guy threw the gun in the car, and the guy threw the drugs down. So they charged everybody with it. And with my prior arrests months before that, it was hard for me to say, hey, I didn't do that when I already had been charged with other arrests. It just didn't look like it would be favorable for me to go to trial on charges like that.
Now, you and I both grew up in Atlanta.
Correct.
Was there a code in your community that suggested that you should not tell on these other guys?
Oh, yeah. We call it snitching. And let's say snitches get stitches, so no, nobody stitched.
How did that affect that not telling on the others? How did that affect you, an innocent man, as you've stated, being ensnared in the criminal justice system?
Well, I told the officer that it wasn't mine, but I did not want to point at these guys and say, hey, this is his and this is his. These were classmates, these are childhood friends. And at that time, and please make no mistake about it, I was doing criminal activity back then, but that particular day in question, I truly was innocent, but those guys, I didn't want to snitch on them and say, hey, it was his and this guy or that guy. I did not want to do that. And that just hurts your reputation. It hurts your family. And it's just a code of silence that you just have growing up in the hood.
Now, since you've matured and found the need to raise a family, have you taken steps to get your record expunged or cleaned of those offenses?
Yes, sir, I did.
And tell us about that.
Well, when you have those charges on you, it affects everything in your life. If you're trying to get a loan, get grants, well, not a loan, but necessary grants. If you're trying to move in a certain apartment, a certain side of town, you get denied based on something that happened years ago in your past.
Are you a different person today than you were 20 years ago?
Most definitely I am.
And I know that you're engaged in community upliftment and improvement in the Carver Homes neighborhood. You've got your own charity now?
Yes, I do.
And has the expungement or record restriction process helped enable you to better take care of your family and teach folks in the community how to do better?
Well, it did good for me, but it does even better when I mentor.
Okay.
I'm mentoring a lot of young men, and when they come to me to do community service through my nonprofit, they actually come back. They come back because they like what I teach them. I keep it straight. I meet them where they at. I don't talk over their head. I talk the language that they're talking. I know what they're facing, the influence that actually makes them do wrong in the first place. And so I try to show them through my life experience how to untangle the web that they've been put themselves in. And so the restorative justice program you have here, it really helps me out. It helps me out tremendously, and I applaud you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Derek. How can viewers reach you and your organization?
Well, they can reach us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page called Doing Good Among People. Okay, we call it DGAP for short, DGAP, but it's Doing Good Among People. We have a Facebook page. We also can call our office at 404-287-6725.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for your true commitment to serving Fulton County's most vulnerable citizens. I recently had the pleasure of meeting the Long Beach County prosecutor, who, like my office, is responsible for prosecuting all adult misdemeanor crimes committed within that jurisdiction. So what, if any, similarities do our two agencies share? Our Kenya Johnson explains.
With less than 90 days on the job, Fulton Solicitor Keith Gamage was visited by Long Beach City Prosecutor Doug Hoppert in his office. Long Beach in Los Angeles County has about 500,000 residents, and like Fulton County, their issues are diverse in nature. The two men, with much in common on this day, wanted to talk about a host of topics, with number one being diversion programs. Solicitor Gamage asked Mr. Hoppert to explain the diversion programs in his jurisdiction.
In Long Beach, we have several diversion programs that are geared towards not just affecting an outcome in a case, but affecting an outcome in a person, and trying to have them leave the criminal justice system better than they went into it. So we have programs based on helping people, if they have a suspended license, they can attend a class, try to help them get that license back, for example. We have life skills courses, and we also have a unique program that we started in Long Beach called Promising Adults Tomorrow's Hope. And it's a special workforce development program for 18 to 24-year-olds. The intent of the program is to help them become more employable, to provide better employees for the community, and also to help them keep their record clean so that they're more able to get jobs after the case.
The Long Beach prosecutor was in the Fulton County, Atlanta area for a training session on implicit bias at Morehouse College. During the conversation, Solicitor Gamage heard about what California is doing about undocumented drivers.
In California, we obviously have a large population of undocumented persons. And so in the legislature a few years ago decided that it was in the interest of public safety to have them registered, have them learn how to drive a car legally and to get a driver's license. So now anyone in California, regardless of documentation, is allowed to get a driving license. What it does is it gets people who formerly were not in the system. They hadn't been fingerprinted, they hadn't been tested for driver safety. Now they're in the system, they're eligible for a driver's license. Many of them still don't do it for fear of being in that system. But now we have a higher percentage of drivers on the street that are licensed. And I think it's probably safer for the general public but it's also better to have them basically participate in the DMV so that there's a record of them in the case of an accident or anything else.
Statistics tell us that those folks who drop out of high school are most likely to be the folks we see incarcerated and spending long-term sentences in prison. Has your office done anything to address those issues with special regard to young people?
I'm glad you identified that as an issue because prosecutors don't often think that way in a long-term basis. But there's no question that state prisons are full of people that dropped out of high school. As high as 80% of the state prisoners in California are dropouts. So if we can do anything to improve attendance at school and help people just get through 12th grade, we know they're going to be more employable, they're less likely to be abusing drugs and alcohol, and they're far more likely to be members of society in a productive way, far less likely to be involved in crime. They're also less likely to become victims of crime. In one study in one of the counties in California, they found that 95% of the murder victims under the age of 25 were dropouts. So not only are they more likely to be involved in criminal activity, they're more likely to be the victim of criminal activity. So we're really targeting chronic truancy in the early grades as a real big focus for our office, trying to keep them engaged as early as 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. In some of the at-risk neighborhoods, we know there's a high level of gang recruitment. We feel that keeping the kids in school just through graduation will help starve the gangs of new members, help improve their chances in life, and make Long Beach a safer community.
That's fantastic. I salute you really for those efforts and for being a progressive-minded prosecutor. Here in Georgia, particularly in the metro area, we are moving toward criminal justice reform, and I am very much rooted in restorative justice, figuring out approaches that not only protect the public from those serious criminals, those folks who are a threat to our public safety, but doing all we can to keep young people in school, to keep folks on track for employment. And so I'm so glad that you took a moment to come by and share with us some of your ideas and that we can form a partnership going forward and be helpful to one another across state lines.
Absolutely. And Solicitor General Gamage, I appreciate your leadership on these issues as well. Something you said a few minutes ago really struck a chord with me, and that is that prosecutors historically have been fighting hard to be considered tough on crime. What we really ought to be doing is trying to be smart on crime. And sometimes that means treating different people a little bit differently as regard to their record. Someone with a longer record maybe needs a more harsh punishment than someone who's a first-time offender, a low-level offender. This may be their first intersection with the criminal justice system. And if we can return them to society better than they went into the criminal justice system, you know what we're going to do? We're going to prevent them from graduating on from misdemeanors to becoming felons. And our jobs as misdemeanor prosecutors, I think, should be to do that, to reduce crime, not just today and exact justice today, but make sure there's reduced crime 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
I concur with you. Thank you for your efforts and for all that you give to the citizens of our country.
And thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kenya. And it was great meeting Prosecutor Doug Harbert. As you've heard, restorative justice comes in many forms. We've learned about restorative justice efforts from our colleagues in Long Beach, California, and criminal record restrictions right here at home in Fulton County during the Record Restrictions Summit, showing another way that Fulton County is committed to helping citizens thrive by clearing their criminal records and removing barriers to employment and housing. As we close, we invite you to join us on our website and social media. Be sure to sign up and receive the Gamage Report, our quarterly newsletter. Please join us next time as we continue the conversation about restorative justice for a whole and safer Fulton County. For Restorative Justice, I'm Solicitor General Keith Gamage. Until next time, please be safe.
Thank you, Solicitor. When we come back, how accountability works with juvenile offenders and their parents. Juvenile Court's Our Children, Our Future segment is next. Fulton's Juvenile Court is the largest juvenile court in Georgia and amongst the largest in the southeastern United States. Now, the court hears all cases involving allegations of dependency of children under the age of 18, children in need of services under the age of 18, and delinquency and traffic violations concerning children under the age of 17. So because of the age of the clients the court serves, how they're held accountable is unique. Thomas O'Connor explains in the Our Children, Our Future segment.
Hi, I'm Thomas O'Connor, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Our Children, Our Future, where we take a look at juvenile court and our programs for youth and families. When it comes to the justice system, the evidence is clear that one size does not fit all. It's part of the reason why juvenile courts are separate from adult courts. Even within our juvenile court, some youth and families have unique needs and challenges that require individually tailored solutions. Our goal is to hold youth accountable, restore children and families, and protect the community. Accountability courts are a truly innovative and effective way of helping such families and getting them back on track. Fulton County's juvenile court has 3 accountability programs: juvenile drug court, juvenile family treatment court, and behavioral health court. Joining us today to talk about accountability courts is Dina Ingram, Juvenile Court's Director of Court and Family Services. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
So for those of us who aren't familiar, what are accountability court programs?
So accountability courts are courts that provide alternatives to sentencing that provide proven research-based alternatives to get to the root cause of deviant behavior, which ultimately reduces reoffending, saves lives, and restores families. Now, sometimes people kind of refer to accountability courts that there may be a perception that is a soft on crime approach, but in reality, it's a smart on crime approach because by seeking to identify a root cause of deviant behavior, we actually intervene at the earliest opportunity possible.
That's important. It's kind of like treating, the disease rather than just the symptoms. It's getting to those underlying things. So what can accountability courts offer, that are different from the regular court process?
So as you mentioned, we have 3 juvenile accountability courts. Choices is our juvenile drug court, and it serves youth with documented clinical needs as it relates to drugs. We also have Partners, which is our juvenile behavioral health court that you mentioned. And that court is for youth with diagnosed behavioral illnesses and co-occurring disorders who are involved with the court. And then our last court that you mentioned was Family Treatment Court, and we refer to that as HOPE, Helping Our Parents Excel. And that's for adults who have issues with chemical dependency, which has resulted in their children either being removed from their care or at risk of that removal. So the accountability courts that we offer actually provide this intensive supervision, monitoring, and support through having clinical needs assessments or clinical screenings by our team of professionals, which could include behavioral health clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, and then we also combine that with the risk needs assessment to identify, again, what are those root cause needs to develop an individualized case plan for each of our children and adults that we serve to meet their specific needs.
That's interesting. It sounds very, very comprehensive. I'm curious, what has the reaction been from participants?
Well, that's interesting. We have adult participants in HOPE, and then we also have juveniles in our other 2 courts. And so for the adults, I think overall they understand and value and appreciate the intensive support that we provide and feel that we actually help them kind of get on a path forward. For our juveniles, it ranges from we're doing too much to really growing to understand the importance of the intensive support we provide to help them be successful.
Excellent. And, I understand that recently Family Treatment Court, they held their April graduation. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so Family Treatment Court, again, is HOPE. And so that court, for participants to graduate, they have to go through 4 phases. So just like school is freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. And then the culmination of that, it usually takes about 18 to 24 months. We have a graduation ceremony to celebrate their process, their sobriety, their accomplishments, and then their path forward. So as you can imagine, that's really an exciting time for us, and not only for the team members. And our family court treatment team actually comprises of people from different agencies. It's a multidisciplinary team. So you have the DFACS, DJJ, Child Attorney's Office, all working to support the adult to reunify with their child and regain sobriety.
And graduation is really a thing to celebrate then.
It really is.
And so I understand accountability court, it is really a commitment though. What should families know if they're interested in learning more about it, interested in possibly joining a program?
So what families first should know is that our courts, our accountability courts actually serve youth who have, people who have cases in the court. So either youth, juveniles who have delinquency or children in need of services cases, or adults who have dependency cases. So the involvement in these courts is through those programs. But even if you have a case, a person could a child would let their attorney or probation officer know of their interest in the program, and then an adult could let their attorney or maybe a DFATS case manager know.
Excellent. And so I personally have seen a lot more accountability programs just throughout the entire state. Tell me a little bit what it's like to be on the forefront of this new movement in the justice system. It's got to be exciting.
It's very exciting. Through the foresight of our chief administrative officer and our judges in Fulton County Juvenile Court. Fulton County Juvenile Court has always been on the forefront of cutting edge and best practices in juvenile justice in the state. And so while we have been on the cutting edge, our focus is really not on being on the cutting edge, but making sure that we're timely meeting the needs of our children and families that we serve, and that we're using best practices, identifying those needs through risk and needs assessments, to then provide the appropriate and implement the appropriate treatment to make sure that we're meeting their individualized needs.
Definitely. And so as we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to cover that we didn't get to?
I think I would like to say that it's not really a one-size-fits-all approach. That is not the most effective approach when trying to meet the needs of individuals. We really look at it as a more tiered approach. So if you can imagine a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid, it's the widest portion of the pyramid. So that's our foundational supports that we provide to all children and families that we interact with at the court. And then for those who might need a little more targeted support, that would be our tier 2, where we provide more targeted supports and interventions. And then at the most narrow point of the pyramid is where we find our children and families that have more specialized needs and need that really intensive support to help them be successful and move on their path forward. So I really would like to emphasize that tiered approach and not treating all children or all families the same, but really trying to figure out what's at the root cause to get to those real solutions.
All right, well, Mrs. Ingram, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for watching Our Children, Our Future. Looking for more information about accountability court programs? Here it is.
Thanks, Tom. We'll be right back to wrap up this edition of Fulton Law and Justice. Stay with us. Fulton County has committed itself to serving its residents in 6 priority areas. The strategic goal for Fulton's Justice Partners is making sure that all people are safe. Now, on Fulton Law and Justice, we show you how Fulton's law enforcement and justice partners are doing that every day in how they serve and in the programs they provide to enhance the lives of all people, young and old. Well, we hope you enjoyed this edition of Fulton Law and Justice. I'm Jolene Butts Freeman. We'll see you next time.